Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host of these TechTonic Conversations. Today, on this Tuesday, March 18th, 2025, I am thrilled to welcome you all to the episode 5 of our ongoing Deloitte Tech Trends 2025 deep dive sessions. And I will also remind you that this is a live webcast conversation. So if any of you might have any questions that you would like to ask the panel today, and boy, do we have a panel today, please use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform so that we can get going and get the conversation up and get anything that you might have on your mind answered or resolved. With that, I'm going to very briefly introduce my panel and invite the panelists to actually introduce themselves. And I will start with Ian Cairns. Ian is the co-founder and co-founder and CEO of FreePlay. Ian, thank you so much. Can you please give us a little bit of your background and sort of who and what FreePlay is?
That's great. Yeah, Dalibor, thanks for having me, everyone at the Deloitte team. FreePlay is a startup a couple years old. We are focused on helping, we say, product development teams build great AI products. So we spend our days helping tech companies who are creating software around generative AI figure out how to make it work well. You know, everyone's heard about problems like hallucinations. How do you get those to go away? How do you know if it's actually doing what you want for your customers? So that's my domain. We spend our time with people from growth stage startups to Fortune 100 companies that are building agents and those sorts of things. So it's perspective I bring. My career, I've always worked on the tech side of developer products and product management, and then as a leader, I would say I'm a startup person, but I also spent 7 years at Twitter, was head of product for developer platform there. So that's what I bring to the group. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, Ian. Next, I'd love to introduce Tatiana Dominguez. Tatiana is our tech talent transformation leader at Deloitte. Tatiana, welcome to the conversation. Maybe a couple of words about who you are.
Yes, awesome. Thank you for having me. So I'm a managing director at Deloitte. I've been in the tech consulting space for about 25 years or so. And I started as a software data engineer myself, so a fellow geek nerd here on the line. And then the last 7, 8 years, my focus has been on developing our tech talent in emerging domains, cloud, AI, quantum, and also cultivating our engineering and architect professionals. These are obviously talent that's super important to us, and that is where I've spent my time ensuring that they're successful and continue to evolve.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and welcome to the conversation. Today's session is actually going to be all about applicability of AI to tech talent specifically. So we call this session IT Amplified, right? How AI elevates the reach and remit of tech talent. And last, but certainly not the least, is the gentleman that I am thrilled to call a friend and a brother from another mother, someone that has, I believe, the coolest title of all of the 500,000 Deloitters around the world, the chief futurist of Deloitte and the executive editor of Deloitte Tech Trends, Mike Bechtel. Mike, thank you very much for coming back to this show.
Dalibor, where you been all my life, buddy? I've missed you the last couple weeks, but the camera, the lens ratio, the aspect ratio notwithstanding, you don't see my head getting bigger and bigger from that gracious introduction. Thank you, pal. It's a pleasure to be with you, folks. It's a pleasure to be with y'all too. This topic is near and dear to my heart. This idea of AI as a license to not just automate but elevate, and the ability to I think of AI as rocket fuel for elevated human ambitions. Yeah. Too often I feel like our clients get pulled into the better, faster, cheaper, stronger trap. Like, hey, we can automate X and to deliver today's results cheaper, right? Faster. I think what we're going to hear today from leaders like Tatiana and Ian, right, is that this is actually the beginning of an ability to do tomorrow's work for the first time, or today do today's work not just cheaper but maybe better. And so let me go ahead and share a little bit of context before we dive right into the gory details. So
Absolutely.
1 second.
And I'll do a thumbs up once I see everything okay. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, fabulous. Okay, cool. So, folks, a bit of important, I think, groundwork. Our Deloitte Office of the CTO team has been working to identify what's new and next in tech for the last 16 years. And we don't share that. It's not a boast, right? That's not a trust us, we're professionals sort of self-congratulatory flex. Rather, it's an acknowledgement that when you've been up to your eyeballs in all things newfangled long enough, you start to see patterns. We like to say trends within the trends. And one of the things we've sussed out, right, is that there's a set of things that always show up around growth, around elevation, around, I think, pioneering innovation. Things like ever simpler user interfaces, right? Things like ever smarter data systems, and things like ever stronger number crunching platforms and compute strata, right? And those of you who've been part of our prior episodes have gotten deep dives in each of those.
Yep.
But one of the things we've seen is that you can't get to tomorrow unless you take good care of today, right? When I used to be a venture capitalist, meeting world-class founders like Ian, and if only I'd timed it right? But born at the wrong time, Ian, that could have been great. But I remember thinking, if you could build a 10x simpler, smarter, or stronger solution, we would stroke a check. Because when you're starting from first principles, it's all about pioneering growth, or at least most. For Deloitte's clients, right, you're not starting from first principles. You're starting from a successful household name organizational enterprise tech stack. I spoke with a CTO in Santiago, Chile a couple months ago, and he said to me, do you know the old story of how God built the world in 7 days? And I said, of course. He said, do you know how he was able to do it in only 7 days? He says, no, do tell. I could tell it was a joke inbound. He said, because he did not have a legacy application to renew or a core to modernize.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh gosh, that's clever. But I think that the getting beyond cleverness and into, I think, clarity, leading organizations can't do any of that fun stuff on top unless they manage the people, finance, culture, process side of the org. We call that the business of tech. Unless they keep the barbarians away from the gates, right? Cyber risk, trust. And unless they drag those rusty but trusty legacy systems forward, right? The core modernization piece. And so for the last 16 years, we've found that these are the 6 fishing holes where enterprise billions are saved or made, right? Where citizen-facing excellence is delivered or encumbered. And it's with that view that we can jump into today's trend, specifically this one around the business of tech, the people, the culture, the process side. And as you said at the jump, Dalibor, it's this idea that AI is elevating, amplifying, otherwise turning up IT outcomes. And interestingly, IT budgets and IT headcount. And that feels like such a contrarian thing to say, because again, when you hear the AI story, you tend to think about what? About doing today's stuff with less folks. But in truth, as I think Ian and Tatiana are going to explain to us in great detail and with, I think, some surprising insights, when you give IT professionals AI tools, it's like giving Tony Stark the Iron Man suit, right? Like a genius billionaire, that's cool. What's even cooler? A genius billionaire that can fly, shoot lasers out of his palms. And that's sort of what we're seeing, right? Is that this isn't, oh, we can cut IT budgets in half. It's, whoa, did you see what IT cooked up with the new engineering project? Did you see the talent development work that we've been able to do thanks to Gen AI? Have you seen the FinOps transformation in part delivered thanks to AI augmentation? Infrastructure, cyber, you name it.
Yeah.
IT folks armed with even better tools can deliver even better outcomes. And so, again, devil's in the details, and we're going to get to all of them. But the big pattern that we've seen, which is maybe contrarian and surprising, is that IT is going through a glow up right now thanks to AI. It's not becoming this sort of automated, department with no lights on and only robots. It's, wow, look at the stuff people are able to do with it. We should give those folks more of our time, more of our talent, and I think more of our treasure. So with that, Dalibor, I'm pumped to introduce Ian, who's living this as a founder and a change maker, and I think a navigator in this space. And Ian, I mean, tell us about free play, and feel free to add, edit, or delete any of the context that I just dropped, brother.
No, that's great. I mean, you're a fun communicator, Mike. So you tell this story well. It's good to hear you talk about it. But
Thank you.
I mean, I think what we bring is probably like a lot of folks at Deloitte. You also mentioned somewhere in there, the idea of citizen-facing excellence. I did get to spend some time working in government in DC as well. So I've been on that side of things and saw the early days of the US Digital Service and what happened there. I think that, what we've been fortunate to do for the past, call it 2.5 years now, is spend our time with the leading tech companies and the tech organizations at, companies in other industries, financial services and government and otherwise, who are really figuring out like how to adopt this stuff in the early days and how to make it work and what it looks like both in their customer or consumer facing, delivery of services and their products, as well as in their workforces to, figure out how to make things more efficient, more effective. I love, like you said, giving people rocket fuel for their creativity and their jobs to get more done. And so I think, we can probably share a range of stories about what we've been seeing people work on. Just to anchor a little bit, I said it intro before, but part of where we spend our time is in those organizations where they are saying, you know what, we are going to be on the front edge of this curve. We're going to figure out how to build an agent platform and automate a bunch of the customer-facing interactions that our customers have been doing, clicking buttons and doing different workflows and exploring our complicated UIs. To your point about simplification of user experience, they're figuring out, okay, we want to do this. When we start to do it, what happens? And I think that I spend a lot of time having these conversations with folks. It seems like we're still in a place where 4 out of 5 leaders kind of know what's coming, but are mostly hearing the stories. And then, for the 1 in 5 that are like really getting hands-on in the weeds, in the details, you quickly learn this stuff is both incredibly powerful and a ton of, fun. And it's also a little bit mind-bending and frustrating. I think we've all kind of seen these stories where if you're trying to, even I'm sure everyone on the phones talk to ChatGPT, prompt it to do something and it gets it a little bit wrong. What happens when that occurs in your customer interaction? What happens when you're trying to automate a financial process in your organization with AI and it gets it a little bit wrong, right? You don't want that to happen.
Right.
So that's part of what I think, we spend our time helping people figure out is if you're in that world, how do you actually do that? And there's a couple of things we can jump into, as conversation goes, but I think the big things we've seen are the people that are really getting their hands dirty and solving these problems are quickly learning that the tent is wider for what counts as IT talent than it used to be. We were kind of joking before this call started and we were just all catching up about using Cursor. If you're an executive on the phone who hasn't ever written code before, go download this application called Cursor. Try to get it. Mike said he worked with it to build the Pong video game. And even if you've never touched code and don't know how to deploy a piece of software, just ask it and it will guide you through the process. It's kind of magical to give you a sense of how easy this stuff is. So I think we're seeing like there's more and more people being pulled in from across the organization. This is kind of an era where the domain experts are contributing to tech products in a way that they haven't before. There's not this strong dichotomy between who can do tech work and who can't. And I think we're also just seeing overnight, I think a lot of folks on the phone have seen it too, massive increases in efficiency and what's possible. Millions of dollars saved on internal operations process, incredible new superpowers given to customers on the customer facing product side. So those are all some things we bring to the table. I'll pause there, but excited to keep digging in.
So Ian, a question for you. I know that Deloitte actually, in one of the earliest tech trend publications, maybe 15 years ago, had a thought that ultimately all companies are tech companies. And it was like, well, maybe. Well, it turns out if you're not sort of on tech now, you're probably not in business long. Is what you just said a version of going forward? Pretty much all employees will have to be or are tech talent.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. I know that you all spend a lot of time with, your customers on digital transformation projects, which often has been a proxy for how do you move off of on-prem, data centers to the cloud. There's a lot more transformation to be had than, just where we run our compute layer, right? And, I've thought about it a bit this way. I think it's, even just having that sense of really, getting hands-on and being able to do incredible new things with Cursor or incredible new things with ChatGPT, right? If you've done, things with deep research or with Claude or any of these, kind of accomplish a similar goal, the art of the possible has just shifted significantly for people that have never written code. I think a lot of the conversation in industry has been about, what is the future of the software development role? And I wonder if that's sometimes just the wrong frame for the question, right? I think it's an important question. The majority of people on my team are engineers. We build developer products. I care deeply about that question. But it kind of implies that, the ability to do the execution of the task, writing software, is itself the job definition. And everybody else that doesn't have that job title is implicitly not involved in writing software or, developing something. That has suddenly shifted, right? And, I think we're going to see quickly, and we're already seeing it, right? The people that are really on the front end, there are lawyers working with Cursor to, build an application. And it doesn't have to be Cursor either. It can be any of these applications that are doing this. I'm just picking out a popular one. But, to create an app that will help them get their work done in a quarter or a tenth of the time that it used to. And they never had a computer science degree, maybe never took a comp sci class, have never had to write code as part of their job. And so I think, Dalibor, to your point, that is very much how I think the future is going to look is, less of more people coming into the tech org and more of tech just being finally truly distributed across every role in a business.
Tech for all.
Yeah. This almost this I think everybody, not everybody, I'm old enough to remember this 80s when word processing and Excel spreadsheets came up first. You actually had to be trained. You had to go through courses. You had to learn this. You were special, right? It was special if you were the accountant who had access and ability to operate in the new accounting system that first came in late 80s. And then suddenly that became just part of Office Productivity Suite. And now, obviously, everybody uses the internet, Googles, everybody is using Word. And so it almost feels like software development and other magical things of yesteryear perhaps will just become part of the Office Productivity Suite, and that just is expectation. That's the way we do, right?
Yeah,
I
I
also,
think
yeah,
our,
Tatiana, please.
I was gonna say I'm sure that our clients are the same place that we are, which is that Mike, to your point, a lot of the day-to-day is from a core mod perspective is everyone wants to take advantage of AI and agentic, but you've got the day-to-day tech issues that are looming and you need to address. So I do think it's really important to understand what it is that you're trying to solve with AI and agents. That's something that we're thinking about as well, to the point of having our engineers and developers use it to code faster and more efficiently, but then also identifying what are the agents that people can use it to do their job day to day. I imagine that there are a lot of folks that are listening in that would love to use agents and AI more in their day to day. And I think the majority probably are not. So I think it's a really good opportunity to get educated on first what are agents, what are AI agents, and hopefully not overkill on things that don't need them, but then understanding how that relates to your business. How is it going to speed things up? Not just having agents for the sake of having agents. And I like to say this a lot, especially when we're talking about our tech talent, is education is super important. And it can't just be, the technologists in the company. It really needs to be everybody to understand what this means, not be scared by it, but understand that, to your point, Dalibor, that everything is kind of shifting. And the things that we're going to be focused on and might give are some of our engineers and tech talent also an opportunity to focus more on the business requirements and almost shift to be more of a perspective of the product owner, where maybe they haven't reached over to that part of the process. I think opening up that aperture is super, super important for our engineers to do. So, knowing what things are, how does it apply to your business, and making sure that the rest of the organization also understands it too, I think is super important for adoption.
We, Tatiana, sort of a goosebumpy and visceral tip of the hat to your insight right there. Um, and Ian, yours, until you experience the radical speed and simplicity of getting from zero to something with these tools, you haven't experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And the chasm between walking the walk and merely talking the talk is vast. We Here's the goosebumps just briefly. We were doing a program, pardon me, with one of our next generation C-level academies here at Deloitte, which is something we do to help people who are about to take the next step in their career take it with more confidence and more understanding and more preparedness. Great. And we were sitting around a table thinking, wouldn't it be cool if in our future scenario planning session we had an app that could allow people to plot potential mashups of potential futuristic trends in a way that was useful to their potential new role. And 3 years ago, that would have been yeah, that's cool, but it's a $65,000 pilot and it probably won't work. Last month, I grabbed myself, not that we need to bring Forrest Gump into this, but I brought myself about 15 Dr. Peppers. And I just coded a series of prompts and it was ready. And we used it live a week later. And I thought to myself, that if a geezer like me can get from concept to production code in a week, then everybody is a technologist. And so Tatiana, it's so cool to hear that we're bringing that gospel at scale to the practice and our clients.
Yeah, I've been seeing this and talking to leaders about it. I see kind of this dichotomy, right? And when we talk to people about it, I use this analogy that it feels like working with generative AI is like a new building material. If you're building with clay versus wood, right? They just have different properties, right? And if you don't have a native sense of just what it feels like to work with generative AI technology, from sitting and doing something like Mike said, or just spending a bunch of time prompting yourself and trying to solve a problem, use it to write your next deck, use it to write your next executive memo, use it to write your next job description. I published a job description recently. I did it in one shot. I just described to Anthropic Claude what I wanted. I didn't edit a thing. It's like, great, it's good enough. Get it up. We all do those kinds of things all the time. But until you start to build that native sense for this is how the technology behaves, I think it can be really difficult to even think about how else you might use it, right? And kind of the inverse in a positive way is true, where once you start to build that familiarity, I think for a lot of folks, the connections start forming and you realize how many other things you can do, both personally, which is just interesting and fun, and also, in your business, what else becomes possible. It feels like so many things are possible, but you want to build a native instinct for what that's like.
Yeah. I love that description about the new material to build with. That's such a good, so awesome. That's a golden nugget I'll take away from this for sure.
Awesome.
Tatiana, I know that you had sort of led the efforts of deploying this to help internal Deloitte tech teams elevate their readiness. Can you perhaps tell us that story? So what actually happened? What were the challenges? What were the obstacles? What was the outcome at the end? And maybe even why did you do it? What was the drive?
Yeah, so there are two key things that we focus on the last few years. The one is this concept of a guild. And as you can imagine, as it was back in the medieval times, we wanted to help our practitioners build capability in emerging tech domains. So we had a blockchain one. We started actually with machine learning, then it evolved to AI. And now a lot of the work that we do with it is very much on the kind of one of the tenets of the guilds is experiential learning and actually getting what we call hands-on keyboards. So super, super important in general for the population of our engineers and our architects. But then beyond that, I always think it's really important to actually, Ian, to your point, see it in action and be able to see what the technology can do. So that's where our focus was in building, and it still is in that. So we've got one on quantum, we have one with unlimited reality, which is AR, VR, and that continues to be really core in building that capability. And the point of that was when we do have a tech that is basically nascent, what are ways for us to build up those skills while it becomes more mainstream, so that we're ready to then address it with our clients. So that was really the driver for those. And we love our guilds. We have a lot of members that join either because they want to dabble, or we have very deep technologists, we call them gurus, that they end up being our subject matter experts across the firm. So that's the guilds. The other one that I'll click into a little bit more, and this also talks about, I have two kids, one who's about to go to college, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that are thinking, maybe my kid wanted to go into tech and maybe that's not a great idea right now. So for me, it's something that's top of mind is what degree can they get? And we're seeing this also with talent that's coming new into Deloitte, and I'm sure into a lot of other of the folks listening is what does tech mean for a career? What is next? So one of the areas we call our archetypes was our technical architects. That it continues to be a really, really important group and skill set. And I do believe that in the future with AI and agentic AI, that's going to continue to be a super important group for us to ensure that they know their craft, because a lot of it comes from experience. What has worked in this combination of this infrastructure and this tech landscape, that comes from experience, and it's really, really hard to teach that.
Yep.
And so I think architects is, I think, a good place to focus. Maybe in the future, when the tech continues to evolve, maybe it'll shift as well. But for now, I think we really do need to continue to have our technical architects. So for us in Deloitte, we wanted to know who our architects were, and we wanted to create more. And we also wanted to ensure that we were embedding them in really, really complex projects. So that is a group that we continue to really cultivate. And with this new shift into agentic AI, a lot of the things now that we're making sure that we bring to them is how can you get smart on this? How can you continue to evolve your craft in this particular area and be really critical to the projects that we have and assist our clients, and then also help us internally to shift and to explore different types of technologies. In many cases, they're the ones kicking the tires on their weekends. That's what they love to do, is to work with all these different tools. So it's a great way for us to experiment as well. So that's an example of our group. And then there's a ton that we do with our engineers as well. I know we had a Tech Trends a few years ago around the engineering experience. And in general, as I mentioned, I don't know if you all have read Know Your Developer, but experimentation and giving them space to kind of innovate is super important. And I think all the technologies and Ian, the tools that you all have as well is really a great way for them to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Ian, I wanted to ask you a question here. The AI obviously is accelerating faster than traditional learning methods can keep up, right? So how can executives best support these rapid skill building across diverse teams?
Yeah, I think Tatiana just started getting at it some. Who's the vanguard going to be that's going to get to go figure these things out? So maybe I'll share like two thoughts on that. It's like one for the individual and two for the organization. Maybe starting on the organization side, one of my friends is on the executive leadership team at a company that will go public in 2025. They're doing really well, huge organization, regulated industry, and a lot of compliance oversight and obligations. So they have to figure out, what are they going to do with generative AI in a, way that's appropriate for the business and the state of the technology. And so they've taken what I think is really an aggressive approach, but in sort of a Trojan horse way, where, they have put a bunch of their strong product and engineering and design folks and domain expert, like they're, kind of turned into a data ops team, but a group of people that really know the business problems on solving internal, high value, high ROI business efficiency problems. And they'd be in that group where, I think they could already clearly attribute millions of dollars saved in, OpEx from having gone down this path. But these teams, have been the ones that have been going ahead of the rest of the business and even ahead of the, customer facing experience that they weren't quite ready to roll out at first, and figuring out, how do we work with these models? How do we set up our data infrastructure internally so that, we can pass internal data safely to these models in a private and secure way? How do we, like I said before, build up that familiarity with this new building material? And then I think what started to happen is, those teams have gone from 1 and 2 and 4 projects to now 12 and 20, and it's propagating across the organization. And, each new project they take on, there's more people that are being brought into this like new way of doing things. How do we solve problems in an AI native way? And then I think the flip side of that, similar, conversation recently, but on the other side, I was talking to this leader about the incredible gap between the kind of vanguard in their organization who get it, who have gotten really hands-on and been able to experience like rolling out a big AI project. Mm-hmm. And the people who haven't been able to do that. And he was describing how, intimidated some folks feel, how, kind of unwilling they are to get started. People that are still, looking at this and saying, yes, it's just a lot of hype. Can we let this whole agent thing pass by? And like, maybe AI is going to, go the way of some other things that didn't stick around. And I think he was just kind of pulling his hair out, saying that they don't appreciate like how quickly the world is changing.
Right.
For those folks, I think it's the stuff like, Mike was talking about, kind of like you were saying, Dalibor, the early days of getting involved with the spreadsheet. Think about my dad. He worked in financial services in the 70s and 80s. He got ahead in his career because he was the first person that would walk down the hall and sit at a PC and use it, when they only had one for the floor. And, I think there's just nothing standing in the way of anybody in the organization being able to just start using these tools, and maybe from the leadership tier, that's the thing I would encourage folks to think about too, is how can you just push your people to, use enterprise ChatGPT, use whatever, the Anthropic version, the Google version, the Microsoft version, whatever you have available to your team, just push them, do your next task with generative AI, start to get hands-on, because that kind of bottom-up benefit will occur where people start to see ways to solve a business problem in a new way and are more able to do it. So
Yeah.
I think those are two important opportunities for people to think about.
Ian, one of the and I don't know if people think about this, but sometimes you're on a Zoom, someone may share their screen and they do something, you're like, wow, I didn't know you could do that in like a PowerPoint or you name it. And I have found that doing demo sessions like that, where you actually show people, or like we do this in
Totally.
teams too, is you encourage to say, okay, how did you use AI? Going back to you don't know what you don't know. I find that extremely helpful. So not it sounds really simple, but I think just like, demoing for people, if you've got someone who's really in front of the curve, that might be in a specific function, that'll also help to relieve some of the anxiety and show, hey, actually, this will help you do a really mundane task way faster. It's a win-win. So don't underestimate the demo.
So I was going to ask you one. I mean, this is, I think, an obvious, and it probably is on everybody's mind. It's the impact of this uh, to employees and the uncertainty that these technologies actually bring and expose to employees. Um, it really, like, we really are in the moment of uncertainty. We all, I believe, hope and are working towards creating the utopian future out of this, but it can also go sideways. And I think it will have impact without a question on people and their jobs. So, what strategies can leaders adopt to actually maintain morale and ensure continuous job satisfaction and foster and encourage this adaptive mindset uh, in face of what's there today, right? And
Yeah.
imagine what will be there tomorrow.
I wish that we all had a crystal ball to know, for this specific function, AI and agents will help to do this in the future. I think it's super important. We actually have a tool that I just saw the other day. It's a workforce analyzer that our human capital team has, and it will take a look at all the functions that you have and what's the probability of AI being able to do these tasks. I think being proactive and doing an analysis, especially in functions that are repeatable tasks or things that AI could do, and then thinking ahead on how can you re-skill those individuals for other roles. I think the organizations that get ahead of that will be very well served, and they're going to lead the charge on that. But I think that helps to reduce some of the anxiety. We don't know what to your point on word processing and other bunch of other functions that are no longer needed anymore, is we adapt. We will find other things that, as I had mentioned earlier, I think having a better appreciation and understanding of the business. Sometimes when you're down in the weeds working on a spreadsheet, you may not be able to pick your head up and see the big picture. This allows our professionals to do that. So I think it's really having some foresight on what that's going to be, and helping people to get there, offer some of that reskilling to them. And I think that just helps to reduce anxiety. You won't be able to do that with everything, but wherever it's a no-brainer, I think that's a good way to just be preemptive.
Mm.
So I don't know, folks, other thoughts.
Ian, sorry, that's not meant to be an awkward pause so much as an
No, it's good.
invitation for me to talk less because I talk a lot. Any
I was
thoughts?
pausing. I was pausing in case you wanted to add anything. I mean, this conversation often happens, and I understand where it comes from in terms of what job loss might look like. And, I think that there is always this awkward thing that happens. We're going through this shift where, that is a reality that will happen in some situations. And then there's also like new possibilities in job creation and whole new roles that form. We've started to see the seeds of some of this in our world where, to the point about IT or tech roles moving across the organization, we're seeing engineering and product development teams pulling domain experts from across the business into their organizations where, they're doing financial services related AI. They have CPAs embedded with engineering that are helping with things like prompt engineering and QA and figuring out, are we really getting the right kind of answers here? Because the engineering team might not have the perspective. And we've seen that repeat with MDs and veterinarians. We've seen it frequently with, product specialists that are deep in a, customer support kind of role being moved in because they know what the customer experience should look like. The hottest new programming language is English. Suddenly these folks are in this role. We've had a few people title it as, AI quality or something like that, where, really figuring out, are these systems generating the right outcome for the business is a multidimensional, nuanced set of questions that can look more like a social science problem than an engineering problem.
Right.
Some good friends of ours are building a AI analyst for PE and venture capital firms that will basically write your deal memo for you, pile in all the diligence docs. Is that deal memo good? Like, what does that question mean? Is it,
Right.
Did it find all of the salient points that an expert analyst would have? Did it do the accurate financial analysis on the model? Did it miss any risks that it should have spotted that a human would have, right? And so figuring out those kinds of answers require deep domain experts to be close to what's happening here. And so, I do think that we're starting to see the seeds of new roles forming that, interested folks, I think, especially have an opportunity to lean into early and start to see, like, what could this look like? And I wonder how much that will continue in established functions that, will shift, but will look different in the future.
Yeah.
I'm sensing a recipe here emerging. I'm sensing a recipe emerging. The first part of the recipe is get everybody to start using this. Get actually everybody to start experimenting and using it every day and try to figure out what this new material actually feels like and how can you create something out of that clay. Firsthand, hands-on, everybody.
Yeah.
Plus, let's be honest about the actual skills and work that is being performed today. Let's be honest. And maybe the way to address the uncertainty and the anxiety is to not avoid the reality, but to face it and say, you are a valuable human. Out of this amount of work that you have been doing yesterday, maybe you yourself, through your own experimentation, can point to us where can you actually be adding more value and what can actually be taken off from your plate because it shouldn't be on your plate.
Right.
Maybe that's sort of the combination that then helps create these new roles that Ian is mentioning, the new roles that are emerging. It's almost like, yeah, Mike.
Well, I a couple years back, our team did a study as to what separated perennial innovators, right? Organizations who really didn't, it's one thing to pull a rabbit out of a hat. It's another thing to build a reliable system over decades that continually pulls rabbits out of hats, right? And consistent innovators have two things in common. Thing one, they have a clearly defined and understood North Star. They lead with need, right? There's this idea that regardless of the change and flux in the day-to-day, year to year, they know the mountain that they're ultimately out to take, right? And then thing two, there's a recognition that the activities they engage in pursuit of that North Star not only might change, they will change. They'll change all the time. But good news, if you're in service of a problem worth solving, then it doesn't feel like bedlam. It feels like elevation. Dalibor, permission to maybe go ever so slightly off script and share the world's quickest story with a couple visual aids.
Of course, of course.
Okay. Um,
We're in storyteller mode.
look out,
I
Sparkle
like that you
Fingers.
had visual aids ready. This
I
is
know,
great.
Sparkle Fingers inbound, right? It's like a cooking show. It's just like, how did he have the turkey ready? Anyway, um,
Uh,
I was talking to a bank, one of the largest banks, Midtown Manhattan Energy, uh, protective and skeptical. I'll leave it at that. And they said, listen, it might not be poetic, but our North Star is profitable growth. And we know that everything we do is in service of that. And we also know that the way we get towards it is through differentiated products and services. The thing that kind of slows us down is back office muck and admin and blinky lights in the basement. And what we got to talking about was, if in the same way Deloitte helped this client spend less time on the blinky light problem with cloud and less time on the back office problem with software as a service, that if we could help them spend less time on admin with AI, then they would have more precious cycles free for the magic, for the good stuff. And I think Tatiana and Ian, as you were talking about the practicalities, I get to thinking about a notional protagonist I like to call Toby, right? Because this feels bad for Toby, right? If you concede that Toby's a pawn and that you have to lose a few pawns in pursuit of checkmate, right? That feels very dispassionate.
yeah.
And David Packard, right, of Hewlett Packard, he says you can't shrink your way to success. Well, where am I going with this? I think what Tatiana, what you're teaching us with guilds, with architecture, with all of your points around thinking bigger, and Ian, what you're teaching us about all your points about thinking wider, and is that I think part of leadership is going to be helping Toby swim,
Yeah.
right? And Toby's pumped about it, right? I mean, Toby gets like a better haircut and a quarter zip, and he's a bona fide thought leader. But but only if we help all the Tobys, right? And so, thank you for coming to my TED Talk within a TED Talk. But I think that orgs that get it, that like you need to have you identify your pot of gold and help your people keep moving to it. Like, this is an exciting future. People who are like, but I make this thing, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point, Mike.
This is, the pictures tells 1,000 words. You've just showed us 7 pictures with many thousands of words implied in this. I love this. So
Yeah,
the
I do
message
too.
here yeah, I love this. This is exactly it. That's it. So by the way, what you are suggesting, Mike, is that the onus is both on Toby to say, look, I need to be untethered to what used to be and be willing to actually learn to swim.
Yeah.
I need to get out of my lead shoes and start swimming.
Yeah.
And organization has to be there to say, and we will help you swim. Here is some help. Here is a log you can latch on to float first, right?
Yeah.
But Toby, you gotta pedal, baby. Right?
My dad used to have this line, and he was a man of few words, and he's been dearly departed for 23 years now. But he used to say, "Bub, you got to participate in your own freaking rescue." And it was his way of saying, "We'll help," right? But you like in this image here, right? Here's the ladder. You need to have a couple different disciplines and move those legs, right? And so I do think that it's not entirely up by your own bootstraps, nor is it entirely a take care of all of our people. I think it's both.
It's a partnership. 100%.
Yeah, that's it, Tatiana.
Yeah.
I had a leader the other day say something. Tatiana, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Go for it, please.
This was someone at one of the big research labs who's, hair on fire, way too many things to do, right? Everything to do all at once. And he said he's been guiding his team to do the maximally lazy amount of work on any task. And it was really dissettling for me. I didn't like him saying that. I was like, wait a second, this is, I pride myself and push my team to be diligent and care about the details. Like, explain yourself, right? And I think it was very much to this point where what he was saying is they get to see behind the curtain. They know just how this tech's going to evolve in the next couple of years more than anyone. There's just no way that we're all going to keep just typing away to get the work done. Right. So he's saying, if you've got to write a document, ask an AI to do the first draft, you edit. If you've got to write code, ask the AI to do the first draft, you edit. And, basically two things is like, we're never going to keep up if you don't. And our competitors are going to be doing that too. And so you've got to learn to just shift the way that you work to build with these things. And it's pretty amazing how much you can get done and like how many of the like higher order things you can accomplish in a day if you're not just, focused on crafting each word on the word processor. I thought it was a helpful challenge to think about for our teams.
Dude, I think it's amazing, Ian. I'll never forget my brother-in-law years ago when he was like 20, summer job. He was doing day labor work and found himself painting a fancy home for a fancy local Chicagoan. Names redacted to protect the guilty. But I remember the client came in and saw that they were using paint sprayers on the wall, and she says, "No, I want you to use brushes, like good painters." And they're like, "What?" And so the compromise, like any reasonable painter, was we're going to spray the walls, but we're going to trim the edges with the brushes. And that's kind of the rhythm I've been feeling learning how to work with clay is like, all right, close, good.
You're fine. Mm-hmm.
So here's what I would like to ask us to go next. So we are, of course, talking mostly about enterprises, established enterprises who now facing these challenges. How do you leverage this technology? How do you get your people to actually adopt it for the benefit of themselves and your organization ultimately? What would be the common pitfalls? Perhaps Tatiana, Mike, Ian, what would be the common pitfalls that you see executives actually face when they're trying to scale these AI tools and platforms across the organization? And what kind of advice would you give them?
I will start with mistrust, and I think as general users use, let's say, a chat GPT, and they see that it can get it wrong. Mm-hmm. I think there's natural distrust then that, can I trust this AI? Can I trust this agent to do my job? And granted, there should always be a human in the loop, but I think mistrust and potentially biases and other things that are built into the model. So I think to counter that, having policy and perspective on either guardrails and tools in place or other ways that you're infusing that into the system, the LLMs, super, super important. But that's one that, frankly, I think about and I'm having conversations about is people need to be all in. There's already enough anxiety and other things. I think that is one part that as folks use it more, that will inevitably be something that is hinged onto using AI and agents. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
I've seen another one, which is just this need to kind of constantly revisit and revise assumptions about what's possible, even with this cutting edge tech. I think we see it. I mentioned earlier, like one of the things we spend in the time doing, with our product and our business is helping people get AI to do the right thing and avoid things like hallucinations, or, you mentioned detecting bias. The state-of-the-art models, they don't hallucinate very much. And you'd be hard pressed to get most commercially available LLMs to, say something inappropriate or that's not brand safe in business application context. They've all been pre-trained to avoid doing that. I think that's just an example, but like if you formed an opinion a year ago or 2 years ago, using the very first version of these tools, like they're a lot better now. And Sam Altman at their big developer conference in the fall, he said kind of advice to the development community, whatever you're working on and starting to put in your roadmap now, do something that seems just slightly impossible and like there's no way the model can really do it, because in 6 months, by the time that you actually get to delivering it, the model will be able to do it. And so I think that there is just this, like the rate of change is so intense. I think leaders can get caught assuming that something's not going to work well. It might.
Very good. Very good. We also have a question from the audience. Casey is asking, one of the concerns raised is that we might be losing out on critical thinking skills, right? As maybe more and more people are going to be relying more and more on what their Grok/Chat GPT tells them.
Yeah.
How do you balance building critical thinking skills while still encouraging people to use and adopt the AI acceleration here, right?
I'll go first, if I may.
Oh yeah.
I was having a chat with someone who was talking about the new skills being prompt engineering, and Ian, I like the way you said it, right? English, the hot new programming language, right?
Yeah.
I was in Europe. I had to broaden that. I was like the Vulgate, the proper programming language. But here's the thing. For the last 2.5 years, we've called this prompt engineering. For the last 2,500 years, we've called it the humanities. And what I'm seeing at my university where I teach is, for the first time in a generation, this perilous musical chairs game of less viable majors for less viable roles is starting to go the other way. I joined a board for our College of Arts and Letters, right? Liberal arts, right? And what we're finding is there's more people looking at logic, the classics, great books, West and East. Why? Because that's where the critical thinking sits. And it sits in places like formal logic and STEM too. It's not to rule out math and science. It's just to say I think the big thing we're already seeing, right, is a return to first principles and the recognition that it's always been about asking good questions. It's just that the amount of friction and gobbledygook between asking those and getting viable results has gone down by a few orders of magnitude in 28 months.
Very good. I mean, there's a reason why this sophisticated questioning is called Socratic questioning, right?
It is, right. And goofballs like me running around for 25 years, like championing the essential nature of a liberal arts education. And I finally feeling a little vindicated here.
That's fantastic. Very good.
Those are the degrees that we should be telling our kids to get.
Right. And anything with a statue is worth studying. Great.
This was very good. So Tatiana, Ian, Mike, we are coming at time. I would love to give you a moment to sort of give maybe a final reflection before we close on what we've covered. Maybe what might be some lessons, some perhaps advice to those listening in who are technology leaders themselves. What would be your advice to them? Maybe we can start. I don't know, Tatiana, do you want to go first, and then we go Ian, and wrap it up with Mike?
I feel like we've offered such great advice already. I'll just say I am really, really excited. I think there are endless possibilities. I as far as like what we are doing, and I guess this would be the other thing, is just bring everyone along for the journey. And if you feel that education is needed, I really think that that's one of the best ways to get people moving in the right direction. So
bring everyone along is a great advice. And when you say everyone, truly everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah, Ian.
Probably really similar. We kind of said it at the beginning, get hands-on yourself and get hands-on in your business. don't sleep on this trend. This is not, the latest tech thing that will die out in the next 18 months.
This
I think
ain't
we're already
going away.
seeing, businesses are getting done in 15 minutes what used to take a week to do. We all are going to be doing things differently soon.
So do this and jump in. Mike.
I love your points, Tatiana and Ian. Reminds me of an old quote, when in doubt, side with the dirty hands. Meaning, those who've been making, like they might not have the rhetoric, but they've got the lived experience. And so side with the makers, not the opinion crowd. And then I think the big one, I think breadth. I really, back to that pyramid, that ladder, the way you get up is by having a broader base. And so, if you build widget A for a living, you need to elevate, but how? Connect that time, I'll give you a quick example. Alexis Carrel invented organ transplant surgery because time spent with his grandma learning embroidery, married up with time spent in biology, gave him the ability to figure out how to connect organs in a way that would last as a surgeon. And that don't happen if you go all in on just med school. And so I think breadth, right? Let's hear it for cross-pollination, because I think that's going to be the fast track to elevation.
Breadth as the new depth, right? As your South by Southwest presentation from last Sunday taught us all.
A future Tectonics episode, if you'll have me.
I would be, it'll be a delight and a pleasure. And the answer is absolutely yes.
I'm over here booking deals right in front of my colleague's face. Hi.
Thank you very much. So this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so very much. Ian, thank you very much, Tatiana, and of course, Mike. And I wish you a wonderful and happy Tuesday. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.
It's good to be with you. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye, Tatiana. Bye.